There's a version of you that doesn't exist yet. A version that sleeps better, feels lighter, and doesn't carry the weight of everyone else's expectations on their shoulders. And the only thing standing between you and that version is a two-letter word you've been afraid to say your entire life. But this isn't just about learning to say no. That would be too simple. What I'm about to tell you goes much deeper than that. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand something about yourself that might genuinely disturb you. Because the reason you can't say no has almost nothing to do with being nice, and it has everything to do with something that was done to you a long time ago. Let me start with something that happened to a woman named Elif. Elif was 28 years old. She had a decent job, a small circle of friends, and from the outside, her life looked perfectly fine. But here's what nobody saw. Every single week, she stayed 2 hours late at work because her manager asked her to cover someone else's tasks. She drove her friend across the city on weekday nights, even when she had to wake up at 6. She lent money she didn't have because someone said they needed it. And every time she wanted to say no, something inside her chest tightened, her throat would close, and a voice in her head would whisper, "If you say no, they'll leave. If you say no, you're selfish. If you say no, you don't deserve to be loved." Now here's the question I want you to sit with for a moment. Where did that voice come from? Because Elif didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a people pleaser. Nobody does. That voice was planted. And if you've ever felt the same tightness in your chest when someone asked you for something you didn't want to give, then what I'm about to say next is going to hit close to home. Think about the last time you said yes when everything inside you was screaming no. Maybe it was last week. Maybe it was today. Where were you? Who were you with? And more importantly, what were you afraid would happen if you actually said what you felt? Most people answer that question the same way. They say, I didn't want to hurt their feelings. I didn't want them to be upset with me. I didn't want to seem difficult. But none of those are the real answer. The real answer is this. You were taught, probably before you could even form full sentences, that your value as a human being depends on how useful you are to other people. Let that land for a second. This isn't some motivational fluff. This is psychology. When a child grows up in a home where love is conditional, where affection comes only when you're obedient, helpful, quiet, agreeable, that child learns a survival rule. The rule is simple. Being needed equals being safe, and saying no equals danger. The child doesn't choose this. The child absorbs it, the way lungs absorb air. It becomes invisible. And then that child grows up and walks into the world carrying this rule like a law of physics, never questioning it, never even seeing it, just obeying it. Over and over and over again. But here's where it gets scary. The people around you, some of them can sense this. Not consciously maybe, but they can feel that you're the kind of person who won't push back. And certain types of people are drawn to that the way water finds the lowest ground. They don't have to yell. They don't have to threaten. All they have to do is make you feel slightly guilty, slightly responsible, slightly needed. And you'll hand over your time, your energy, your peace, without them ever having to ask directly. This is what emotional manipulation looks like in its quietest form. It's not dramatic. It's not obvious. It's a sigh when you hesitate. It's a silence that lasts just long enough to make you uncomfortable. It's the phrase, I just thought you cared about me. It's someone telling you, after you finally set a boundary, that you've changed, that you're not the person they used to know, that you've become cold. Be honest. Has anyone ever said something like that to you? Because if they have, I need you to understand something. That was not honesty. That was control. That was someone reaching into the part of you that was already wounded and pressing down on it because they knew it would work. Let me tell you about someone else. A man named Kan. Kan was in his early 30s, married, with a young son. His mother called him every single day, sometimes twice, and every conversation followed the same invisible script. She would talk about her health. She would mention how lonely she was. She would say things like, "You're all I have." And then, almost as an afterthought, She would ask him to come over, to fix something, to bring something, to be there. And Kan always went. Even when he was exhausted, even when his wife needed him, even when his own son was waiting for him to come home. Now here's the part that kept Kan stuck. He loved his mother, genuinely. And because he loved her, he couldn't see what was happening. He couldn't see that the guilt he felt wasn't natural. It was engineered. Every conversation was structured, not with cruelty, but with precision, to make saying no feel like abandonment. And the worst part? His mother probably didn't even know she was doing it, because she learned it from her mother, and her mother learned it from hers. This is how these patterns travel, silently, generationally, like a current beneath still water. And this brings us to something most people never consider. What if your inability to say no isn't a personality trait? What if it's a wound dressed up as a virtue? Think about how society rewards people pleasers. You're called kind, reliable, selfless, the one everyone can count on. But nobody asks what it costs you. Nobody sees the resentment building beneath the surface. Nobody notices that your kindness isn't really kindness at all anymore. It's fear wearing a mask. And here's something even harder to hear. When you say yes out of fear, you're not actually helping anyone. You're lying. Every forced yes is a quiet lie. It tells the other person that you're fine when you're not. It tells them the relationship is balanced when it isn't. It builds a connection on a foundation of performance instead of truth. And eventually, that foundation cracks. You start to resent the people you love. You pull away without explanation. You feel exhausted for no visible reason. You lose your sense of self so gradually that you don't even notice until one day you look in the mirror and realize you have no idea what you actually want, because you've spent so long making sure everyone else gets what they want. Now, I said earlier that the reason you can't say no goes deeper than being nice. And I want to come back to that because this is the part most people miss entirely. The inability to say no isn't just about fear of rejection. It's about identity. Somewhere along the way, you built your entire sense of who you are around being the person who shows up. The helper, the fixer, the one who never lets anyone down. And that identity feels so core to you that the idea of saying no doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It feels like dying. Not physically, but emotionally. Because if you're not the person who says yes, then who are you? That's the real reason this is so hard. It's not about the other person. It's not about the request. It's about the terrifying possibility that without your usefulness, you might not matter. But here's what I want you to hold on to. That belief is a lie. It was always a lie. You matter because you exist, not because you perform, not because you sacrifice, not because you hollow yourself out so others can feel full. You matter because you're here. And the people who truly love you, the ones who deserve a place in your life, they won't leave when you say no. They'll respect it. They might even be relieved because they've been watching you disappear and they didn't know how to tell you. So here's what I want to leave you with. The first time you say no and mean it, it will feel like the ground is falling out from under you. Your hands might shake, your voice might crack. Every alarm in your body will scream that you've made a terrible mistake. But you haven't. You've just told the truth for the first time in a very long time. And the people who punish you for that truth were never on your side to begin with. Remember Elif? She eventually said no. Not to everything. Not all at once. Just one small no. On a Tuesday night, when her friend asked her to drive across the city again, she said, "I can't tonight." 3 words, and her friend said, "Okay, no problem." That was it. No explosion, no abandonment, no collapse. Just a quiet moment where the world didn't end. And Elif sat in her apartment, alone, in silence. And for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. That breath is waiting for you too. You've spent your whole life being everything to everyone. Maybe it's time to finally be something to yourself. If you enjoy content like this, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching.